I've always wanted this life. Not just the feeling of it, the actual life. I wanted to be a mum. I wanted animals, sunshine, to travel in a van. I wanted to live somewhere like Spain. I wanted a slower, more peaceful life surrounded by nature. The problem wasn't knowing what I wanted. The problem was that it felt so far away from my reality that I genuinely didn't think it was possible. I used to joke that maybe I'd get that life in a parallel universe somewhere, because when a dream feels impossible for long enough, you stop treating it like a future and start treating it like fantasy. But the funny thing is, no matter how much life changed around me, the dream never really changed. It was always the same. A simple life, meaningful, a life that felt like mine. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking whether it was realistic and started asking whether I was brave enough to build it. I'm still building it. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but for the first time, I don't feel like I'm dreaming about someone else's life anymore. I feel like I'm walking towards my own. I think the thing that makes me laugh now is that everyone knew what my dream was. I genuinely drove my family mad with it. I talked about Spain constantly. I talked about van life constantly, about nature, to the point where it became a running joke. And to be fair, I understand why people thought I was living a fantasy, because when you're talking about the same dream for years and your reality looks absolutely nothing like it, it sounds ridiculous. Most of the time, I was told to get real or to be more realistic, to choose something more achievable, that life doesn't work like that people don't just get up and move to Spain, and people don't drive around in vans, especially with toddlers. And after hearing that enough times, I think part of me started to believe it too. Not because I stopped wanting it, but because part of me already did believe that it was unachievable, that I wasn't being realistic, that it wasn't something I could really have in this life. I think that's one of the saddest things that can happen. Not when you lose the dream, but when you lose the belief that you're able to have it. If you'd looked at my life over the years, it probably wouldn't have made much sense to have this dream I was holding on to. At different points, I was trying to survive, trying to fit into lives that weren't really mine, trying to become the version of success I thought I was supposed to be chasing. Life took me down different paths I never expected, some difficult, some beautiful, some completely changed me, and somewhere amongst all of that, the dream got buried beneath everything I thought I should be doing, but it never disappeared. And then I became a mum, and I think that's when everything started to shift, because suddenly it wasn't just about the life I wanted for myself anymore. It became about the life I wanted to create for Lucas too. I started asking different questions, not what success looks like, not what other people expect, but what kind of childhood do I want him to have? What memories do I want him to grow up with? What do I actually want our everyday life to feel like? And every time I asked those questions, I kept coming back to the same things: nature, adventure, freedom, presence, connection. Not because I think everyone should live this way, but because it's what feels right for us. I remember sitting next to my old van one day when Lucas was asleep, and the best way I can describe it is that it felt like putting on noise-cancelling headphones. For the first time in my life, all the noise got quieter. The opinions, the expectations, fears, the voices telling me what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what was realistic and what wasn't. And underneath all of that noise, I could finally hear my own voice. And my own voice wasn't saying it was impossible. My own voice wasn't saying that I was living in a fantasy or that I needed to get real. It was saying, why not? What if it is possible? What if you've been listening to everyone else for so long that you've forgotten to listen to yourself? And once I heard that voice clearly, everything changed. Not my circumstances, not overnight anyway, but my belief. For the first time, I genuinely believed that the life I'd been dreaming about all of these years might actually be available to me. So once I realized it was possible, I couldn't really go back. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow it. And that's when I made the decision. I was going to stop waiting for someday. I was going to stop waiting for permission. I was going to start moving towards it now. Not perfectly or with all of the answers, just one step at a time, So I started converting the van, and honestly, it wasn't glamorous. I was learning as I went, making plenty of mistakes, figuring it out as I went. But for the first time, I felt like I was actually moving towards the life I'd spent years talking about. Then we started traveling around the UK, and something interesting happened. Instead of discovering that I'd romanticized it, I realized I genuinely loved it. The freedom, the simplicity, the waking up somewhere new, time outside, adventures with Lucas and the dogs, the aliveness. It wasn't perfect, but it felt more like me than anything else ever had. So I started thinking bigger. I booked our first trip abroad, and honestly, I was equally terrified as I was excited, because dreaming about something is one thing, but actually doing it is another. Then, just before we were due to leave, the van had issues, and for a moment I had a choice. I could take it as a sign to stop, or I could keep moving forward. And that's when I made one of the biggest decisions of my life. I sold the van, I bought a bigger van, and decided to let go of the house. And I committed fully to the life I'd spent years dreaming about. Not because it felt safe, it really didn't. Not because I had all the answers, because I didn't. But because for the first time it felt more frightening not to try it. And then we left, me, Lucas, the dogs, the van. And literally just the essentials of what we needed. I'd got rid of everything else. And all of a sudden, the thing I'd spent years dreaming about wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. I was living it. And that's when I learned something I'd never expected. The life I'd been searching for wasn't actually a place. It wasn't Spain. It wasn't a van. It wasn't even traveling. It was a feeling. The feeling of freedom, the feeling of presence, the feeling of waking up excited about the day ahead, of having enough time to actually experience my life. And the more I traveled, the more I realized that that was what I was searching for all along. I think that's something I've realized recently. People often talk about freedom as though it's a destination, as if one day you'll arrive somewhere and suddenly be free. But I don't think that's true anymore. Van life isn't freedom. Spain isn't freedom. Traveling isn't freedom. You can be trapped in a house, but you can also be trapped in a van. You can be trapped in a job, but you can also be trapped traveling the world, because freedom isn't actually a place, it's an internal state. For me, freedom is what happens when the external life becomes more aligned with who you truly are. It's the feeling of not constantly fighting yourself, not constantly living somebody else's version of success, and ignoring your own voice. And that's what this journey has given me. Not a life without responsibilities, not a life without challenges, just a life that feels more aligned. And that alignment feels more like freedom than anything I've experienced before. The biggest difference between the version of me sitting here today and the version of me from a few years ago isn't where I live. It's not the van or the traveling or even the plans of the future. It's trust. For most of my life, I trusted everyone else's opinion more than my own. I looked outside of myself for answers. I looked outside of myself for permission, for validation that what I wanted was possible. And every time I did that, I became more disconnected from myself. Now, I can still listen to advice, I can learn from other people, but at the end of the day, I trust myself more than I ever have. Not because I think I know everything, but because I've learned that nobody else has to live my life. Nobody has to wake up in the morning and live with my choices. Only me and my son and my dogs. And for the first time, I'm building a life based on what feels right to us, rather than what makes sense to everyone else. So if you're watching this, that's what this channel is really about. Not just van life or traveling, not even about Spain. It's about creating a life that feels aligned, a life that feels true, that feels like your own. I'll be sharing the adventures, the mistakes, the lessons, the reality, the beautiful moments and the difficult ones too, because this isn't a finished story. We're right in the middle of it, and honestly, I have no idea exactly where it leads, but I can't wait to find out. So what does that life actually look like? To be honest, it's not particularly glamorous. It's early mornings with Lucas, the dogs covered in sand, long walks, watching sunsets, growing my own food, travelling slowly, spending more time in nature than I do outdoors, having enough time to actually enjoy my life instead of constantly rushing through it. If you'd asked me a few years ago what success looked like, I'd probably have given you a completely different answer. But now success looks like peace, like freedom, like having time. Success looks like watching my son grow up surrounded by nature and adventure and love. And whilst I don't know exactly where this journey is going to take us, I do know one thing. I'd rather spend my life trying to build the life I dream about than spend my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try.